Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you, depending on where you're joining from. This webinar is brought to you by the CS Mentor, a podcast by Ankit Aggarwal, who's one of the top customer success professionals from India. This webinar is sponsored by ZapScale. We're the easiest customer success platform for B2B SaaS organizations. Welcome, and thank you all for joining us today. We are here with another very, very interesting topic, the rise of AI in customer success, the opportunities and challenges. Now, everyone is talking about AI today. You open Instagram, Twitter, uh, LinkedIn, YouTube, everyone is talking about AI. AI in sales, AI in marketing, AI in creative fields. It's AI everywhere. Fun fact, yesterday, the Danish Prime Minister delivered a speech to Parliament, partly written using ChatGPT to highlight the revolutionary aspects and risks of AI. I mean, it's crazy. So today we're going to be exploring the exciting opportunities that AI brings to the world of customer success. Now, I'd like to take a moment to introduce our awesome panelists for today. We have Ankit Aggarwal. Ankit is a multi-award winning CS professional from India who began his career as a coder and went on to co-found two successful ventures. He's recognized for his contribution to the industry, having launched the CS Mentor podcast and established the largest customer success community in India. Ankit is now settled into a challenging role as a customer success enablement lead at MoEngage. Our second panelist and the special guest for today is none other than Lincoln Murphy, a man who needs no introduction when it comes to customer success, but I am, however, going to introduce him. Lincoln is a world-renowned growth architect, consultant, author, and a keynote speaker. As one of the earliest evangelists of customer success, Lincoln was invited to co-author the book on customer success, which I'm going to be sharing in the chat box in a short while. As founder of 16 Ventures, he has influenced tens of thousands of companies around the world and directly helped thousands through consulting and workshops to get their customers to stay longer, buy more, and advocate for them publicly by focusing on customer success. Now, I cannot wait for Lincoln and Ankit to take you through this amazing webinar. But before we get started, I'd like to go through one tiny thing before, so you know how to participate in today's event. You'll have the opportunity to submit text questions to Lincoln and Ankit by typing your questions into the Q&A box. If you want to chat, please use the chat box in your Zoom control panel. You may send in your questions at any point of time during the webinar, but I'll bring them up at the end during the Q&A session. If you don't want to ask questions in form of a text, you can always raise your hand and I'll allow you to speak so you can ask questions from our panelists yourself. Now, let's get the panelists to the stage. I will not eat up more time. Ankit and Lincoln, a very warm welcome to you. Over to you.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Shivam. And it's great, such a pleasure to have all this wonderful audience today. Now, before we start, today's discussion, I want to have a small question to everyone. Who all are using AI? So we have a small poll around this, and I would like Shivam to run it, please, so that audience can poll. Are you using ChatGPT AI in day-to-day operations? Yes, no, or you are planning to? Please do. You would have a pop-up.
Yeah. I'll wait for 10 more seconds, then I'll stop the poll. We'll see the end results.
It would be interesting to see because personally, I have been using AI at my workplace and it has been giving me insane results. I will discuss more about it, but yeah, let's see from the audience today, what are the results?
Yeah, I'm very curious.
All right. 44% say yes, 32% no, and 24 are no, but they're planning to use ChatGPT AI in their day-to-day operations. Brilliant.
Great. I think we have a mixed audience today, and that's great. Okay, let's start the Q&As, Lincoln. Now, when we talk about the AI, I think the very first thing that comes to everyone's mind is, what AI going to be replace me as a CSM? Should I be worried about it? What are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, so look, we have to be very clear about I can't read the future. I don't know what's going to happen down the road. But I would say right now, the main talking point around this is and you see this in other places too, but I mean, I say it, at this point, I don't see AI replacing you.
Yeah.
What I see is someone who knows how to use AI replacing you if you choose to ignore this set of tools. That's the real risk. And I think, just like anything, like if you kind of put your head in the sand and decide that this is like a new scary landscape and you don't want to be a part of it, that could adversely affect your career. So I think this is something you really want to pay attention to, take advantage of whatever tools come down that you can use. And, like I said, though, long term, who knows? Maybe the robots take over and we don't have to worry about anything.
That's a different thing altogether, Lincoln.
That's
But
that's outside the scope of this discussion.
Yeah, I totally understand, but I totally agree with you, Lincoln. These tools are basically they can help us out in building something. They can help us do our stuff, but in case we don't learn them, I think that's gonna be tough only for us. Now let's go to second question. Talking about AI, since we mentioned that this is important, the person who might not learn AI might get replaced. So what do you think? What are some practical ways to incorporate AI in day-to-day life of a CSM?
Yeah, I mean, so I kind of break it down into kind of three areas where AI is currently and I for like the foreseeable future where AI is going to have an impact on customer success. And one is sort of the customer facing stuff. So this is where we might start incorporating actual chatbots that the customer would interact with. And those are, obviously those have been around for a long time, but the problem weren't super effective. Right. They really, you had to like use just the right keywords. And the whole thing around AI is that I can really just talk to it like it's a person, and the responses it's going to give me are like it's a person. And so it's a much more of a free flowing conversation. And I don't have to be, as a user, I don't have to be good at finding the right information. So I think customer facing things like an actual chatbot, things that have to do with sort of UI or UX fluidity based on what your preferences or your actual activity, recommendations for next steps, recommendations for next projects, things like that. Those are the customer facing aspects of AI. That's great. That will impact your role in customer success to a certain extent, but that's also somewhat outside the scope of what you as a CSM might be dealing with. Obviously your customers are going to be working with that. So you're going to have to know about that stuff, but it's not necessarily going to impact your day-to-day. Then we have sort of the operational stuff. So in customer success operations, the systems that are actually sort of behind the scenes powering things. And that's where you get into AI, the less, the stuff that doesn't make the headlines, the AI that's doing, analytics, things that are happening behind the scenes, to data, to workflows, to processes. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for CS ops to leverage AI in that way, to be able to do better health scoring, or what I call success vector, to make better, to better come up with engagement at scale, customer engagement. So that would have more of an impact on your day-to-day, but it's not something that you're going to have a direct connection with. Like you're going to feel the impact of it, but it's not necessarily something you're going to even work with directly. Like you would just sort of get an alert or have an email that was written for you that you need to polish and send off, that kind of thing. Where I like the thing that I think we could focus on today, which would be much, like the stuff that will have a direct impact on you, is what I call CSM assist technologies, or in this case, CSM assist AI. And these are the things that where you're either actively using generative AI like ChatGPT to perform certain tasks, or there are things that are happening with you sort of as your assistant. So, the most common assistants right now are that might be like third-party products that aren't you interacting with something like ChatGPT would be things mostly they have to do with meetings at this point. So whether it's scheduling, note taking, summarization, key takeaways, things like that. So there's tools like Otter or something like Gong, which will record calls and then provide insights into the effectiveness of those calls. That's really great stuff. So those are the kind of the assistant tools that are out there. And there's, we're not going to be able to talk about all of the there's new ones being added all the time. But the things that where you're going to be interacting with generative AI technologies like ChatGPT, and I saw somebody mention, also Bard in the chat, and Bard is going to be awesome. It's going to be fantastic, and it's going to be great, but it's not right now. It reminds me very much of the early days of ChatGPT. Remember, we're like 6 months into ChatGPT. Just as a reminder to everybody. This is very new, but just in that time, ChatGPT has with GPT-4, which is like exponentially more powerful than 3.5 when they first started. I feel like Bard is maybe like some sort of 3x GPT right now. It felt very limited. The output is not super great. Compared to something like GPT-4. So I talk primarily about ChatGPT and GPT-4 because it is right now the most powerful model that we have access to. And so that's my go-to right now. Bard will get better, of course. All these technologies will improve. But so basically, I think the main thing that we can talk about today is sort of like using generative AI, we'll say specifically ChatGPT, to perform those CSM assist functions. And those functions, just I'm monologuing here and I apologize, but basically we break those down into 4 areas, which is like research, so customer research, brainstorming, and then content and engagement. And those are kind of the 4 main areas that we see ChatGPT helping or assisting CSMs with today. We could talk about those in more detail, but that's kind of the landscape, if you will. Today might change tomorrow.
I think these 4 areas are something which basically take a good amount of time from CSMs. And I think personally, if CSM assist can help us out in these things, what can happen is the CSMs would have more bandwidth so that they can focus on accounts, and then they can play more sort of a strategic role that they should be playing, right? So I think it's more sort of an assistant for you that can help you out in doing your day-to-day operations.
Yeah, and that's how I like to frame it like that. Some people call it, say co-pilot or whatever. And I think if you think of it that way, like this is really just kind of an assistant for you, an intern or somebody to do the heavy lifting. I think then you'll look at it differently than if you were to look at it as something that's going to replace me. It's a threat. I think, yes, it's incredibly powerful. Yes, there's all sorts of interesting risks maybe down the road, but like, it's really, not to minimize it, but it's really just another tool that we can take advantage of. Right. It's powerful. But so I think that's the right way to look at it. This is what's going to allow you to be able to do your job better and more efficiently. And, like I said, one of the areas, so 2 of the areas, the research and the brainstorming, we know that those are things that you need to do in preparation for meetings with customers. Right now, you probably only do the research part, maybe outside of the structured content in your CRM or the structured content in your CSM tool. You probably only do a little bit of the research and probably only for big meetings, like a big quarterly business review or an account review. You certainly don't do a lot of research outside of just whatever is in the structured content. And we could do research, on things like, I have a new customer in a new market or a new industry that I've never worked with. Well, it would be nice to be able to actually go, understand a little bit more about that market, or I'm working with a new customer in a region that I'm not familiar with. What are some of the customs and norms and things, from a business aspect that I should be aware of? Little, quote unquote, little things like that actually are huge and could be super powerful for a new customer that's like, wow, you took the time to research my industry, but we just don't have time for those things. I'm very aware that CSMs are working really hard. Like when we do capacity planning, I routinely find CSMs at 150% or more capacity.
Yeah.
I've seen it like 300%. And then you look at the burnout and the turnover in that organization and you go, yeah, that checks, right?
Yeah.
So I know as a CSM, you're working hard, you're doing what you can. So when I come along and say, hey, you should do more research and you should actually take some time to brainstorm things like potential objections that your stakeholders would have, potential goals that different personas might have. You should definitely take that time. You're like, yeah, cool. I'll get to that when I have time, right? We don't do that. What ChatGPT can do is allow you to do those things. If nothing more, allow you to do those things for those big meetings that you have. So right there, being able to go through that process, doing some research, doing some brainstorming, and preparing for that big meeting will then allow you to be present in that meeting and be in active listening mode, really pay attention. When we're not prepared for meetings, the meetings usually don't go that well because we're kind of scrambling in the moment to figure out, well, what should I ask next? Or gosh, I didn't see that objection coming, so I didn't have a chance to think about how we might break through that objection. And you're just always kind of behind the American expression, behind the eight ball is a pool, a billiards reference. We're always just sort of like, we're always behind. We're never like actually out in front of the customer, kind of pulling them in the direction we want to go. And actually being prepared, doing the research, doing the brainstorming is critical. But again, we don't have a lot of time. So ChatGPT can allow you to do that, if nothing else, for those bigger meetings. And as you start to become more efficient, you can start doing that for the smaller, less consequential meetings that are also important, right? I mean, look, if we're having a meeting with a customer, it should be an important meeting.
Right.
Otherwise, why are we having it? So even for those routine meetings, I should be doing some of that prep work. ChatGPT will allow you to do that. Period. Like it'll allow you to do that where you might not be able to do that. The other thing that is very like a very real thing that I think maybe people outside of customer success just aren't aware of, don't think about. And that is that when you're working at, so far over capacity, and again, I wish that wasn't the reality for so many CSMs, but I think there was just a report where it's like 86% of customer success organizations report some level of burnout.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that sounds low. That's underreporting. Like this is not a badge of honor. This is not something we should be proud of, but it's just the reality. So like what can we do to find some of those efficiencies? And I think this is really where something like ChatGPT can help. Because the other thing, what I was going to say is basically, even if you had time to do some brainstorming, like let's say you found 10 minutes to do some of that. The fact is, when you're over capacity and you're pulled in so many different directions, even if you have that time, you may not have the mental overhead required to be creative.
Yes.
So if we can sort of offload some of that to the AI, we should, right? And I think, and then what happens is, what I find for myself, but also the CSMs I work with, when they do that and they go, like the AI comes back with some, here's some potential objections that your customers might have, and here's some ways to break through that. The CSM goes, oh, okay, that's really cool. And then they start, it like jumpstarts things, and then they can start thinking about, well, oh, here's a couple of other objections that I can think of.
Yeah.
But getting started was a non-starter just because of that mental overhead. So yeah, anyway, there's a lot of really awesome possibilities here. And that, by the way, that research and brainstorming stuff is not something that you hear people talking about too much when it comes to ChatGPT, because most people talking about ChatGPT are just talking about content creation.
Correct.
Mostly for like marketing and sales, maybe some programming stuff, but like with customer success, we have some other opportunities here, I think, that we can take advantage of.
That's right. I would say ChatGPT should be considered as an intern, or maybe like, let's say you want to read a book, but you don't have time. You can just generate a book summary out of it, learn something out of it, and just apply those. So it can save you a lot of time. With that, let's proceed to the next question, which is on the limitations, Lincoln. So ChatGPT, you discussed, there are a lot of opportunities, but yes, there are a lot of limitations as well. So what are those limitations and how do you overcome?
Totally. So ChatGPT, without getting, I mean, we're making a lot of assumptions here that you guys know what we're talking about. There's a lot of really cool tutorials and like, summaries on how ChatGPT works and like how large language models work. And of course, I'm not an AI expert at that level. And that's kind of the cool thing. You don't have to be. ChatGPT is literally just a chat interface that you can talk to. You do have to understand. I think it helps rather to understand sort of how it's like how it works. And so to your point of what are some of the limitations. So the language model was trained on most of the internet up until mid 2021. So there's a couple things I want you to really take away from that. One is anything that's happened after 2021, it doesn't know about.
Yeah.
So I'd say there's probably been a lot of things that have happened, including ChatGPT itself, right? Yeah. So like it's not self-aware in that, from the standpoint of like, it just doesn't have that updated content. Now, it's hard to know that OpenAI is the company behind ChatGPT. They haven't been super forthcoming with everything. It seems like I'm occasionally finding stuff that does seem like it's not just a hallucination, that it does seem more recent than 2021. So I don't know if they're adding more in there, but the point is, like, from a factual data standpoint, you have to know that there's going to be some stuff that's not in there. The other thing is, that's like really important to understand, but really the most important thing to understand, and once I had this realization, it changed everything for me. ChatGPT, or really the underlying language model, is just that. It's a language model. It's not a search engine.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not a data repository that we should go into to pull out content. And remember, like, whatever it comes up with, it's not pulling that content from anywhere. It's literally generating it right then.
Yeah.
Why this is important to understand is it was trained on all of this data to better understand how humans communicate, like how people talk.
Right.
And it just so happens that a lot of that, or that data is still there. So it knows things, but like the power of this is in the language model itself, not in what it knows. Now, the reason I say that is, if you give it a prompt, and so we talk about prompt engineering. Prompting is just asking, or really it's technically saying something to the AI and then letting the AI take it from there.
Right.
This is different than like a keyword search on Google or SQL or something like we might be used to. And so you don't want to be terse. You want to be very verbose in your prompt and make sure that everything in there that you want in terms of output is there, and everything you don't want also. So you want to say, hey, don't do these things. So if I have an email prompt, I would say, don't use common cliches like, I hope this email finds you well, because if you leave it up to its own devices, it'll write an email for you, but it'll be terrible.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing is like, if you write a very basic prompt without a lot of detail on what to include and what not to include, what you're going to get, and this was the game changer for me, what you're going to get is a demonstration of the power of ChatGPT. It will take your very basic prompt and it'll be like, look what I can do. And it might make up things.
Yeah.
It will elaborate on things that you're like, where did that come from? It will write an email, like I said, if that's what you want, but you're like, this isn't based on any known email framework, and this isn't like going to be effective, but it'll do it.
Yeah.
And that's why for some people, you'll try it. You'll go, this is magical. This is amazing. And then you'll quickly go, but I have to like take this content and really like rewrite it basically because it's not very good.
Yeah.
And then the magic wears off. Well, turns out, again, like if you just give it a basic prompt, it'll do all of that. But if you are very specific in what you want it to produce, and also very specific in what you want it to avoid, then you will start to get better content, right? So you have to understand prompt engineering, which is why I think prompt engineering for generative AI going forward. So ChatGPT, of course, Bard, the same thing for DALL-E and Midjourney, those image manipulation. Actually, if you notice the picture of me on the promotional material for this was an AI generated image. Because I needed some new headshots and I was like, let's see what this can do. I thought they turned out okay. It was pretty wild. So generative AI requires prompting.
Yeah.
And so we need to know prompt engineering. But one more thing on the limitations. So if you ask it to write an email for you and you tell it exactly what you want the email, like what needs to be in there, what needs to not be in there, but you don't provide any additional context for it to pull from, it's going to go back to what it was trained on. And what it was trained on might not include anything to do with your product. I mean, it was trained on like on most of the internet, but if your product is new or you had kind of a small website that wasn't really highly referenced, like, even in this case, we probably still suffer from like, bad SEO or whatever, right? If you were not ranking, you might not really be included. It might not be at least weighted heavily. So for a variety of reasons, it might not write an email that's specific to you.
Yeah.
So what do? Well, we need to train the model.
Right.
And this was also a game changer. Again, if you don't train it, it's just going to use what it knows, and that's going to be a demonstration of what it can do. So we need to basically feed it information about our product, our customer. There's always that warning of this is a third-party system. Probably don't give it like super highly sensitive, government secrets.
Yeah,
maybe. But like stuff that isn't, super sensitive, put it in there. Now the thing is, when you put it in there, like, how do you do that? Well, it's a chat interface. It can only accept about 4,000 characters at any one time. So there's with ChatGPT plus, you can, with the subscription, which is like $20, at least in the US, it's like $20 a month. It's very, very worth it. You get access to their plugins, architecture, and there's several plugins that you can use to read in either web pages or read in PDFs. Yeah. In our prompt engineering course that I have, that I built, I have some Python scripts that will take a large text file and split it into what I call chunks that are of the right size to be ingested by the ChatGPT. chat interface, because I wanted something that was really, again, via API and stuff behind the scenes, you can do a lot of this, but just through the chat interface, what can we do to make this super easy? So, take a let's say a transcript of a call we had with a customer, or, transcript of a webinar, or even the contents of a slide deck, like Google Slides that I save as a text file, and I go through the chunkify process and I get those text files. And then I wrote, with the help of ChatGPT, a Google Chrome plugin.
Okay.
That I have it where I initialize a prompt that says, hey, I'm going to feed you some context for our conversation in chunks. And then I have it where I can just drag and drop over those text files into the little chat interface, and it reads the file and submits that. I wrote that, by the way, with ChatGPT.
Okay.
I went to ChatGPT, to the code interpreter in GPT-4, and I said, hey, I had this idea.
And it generated the code for you.
Yeah. Now I had to work with it. I had to debug it. So I say we wrote it, but it really, I had no idea how to create a Google Chrome plugin or extension. Like, I didn't understand the architecture. I was a programmer a long time ago, so maybe I had some a little idea of how things might be structured, but really, I mean, I didn't know anything about it. And the first time I did it, within a couple hours, and the second plugin or second extension I wrote in 48 minutes. And it was wild. And are these plugins something that would be, or are these extensions something that I would want to put on the Google Chrome store? No, they're not super attractive. And, I'm not sure they're ready for that kind of use, but it was a neat prototype. I use it myself.
And
people
that's
in the course.
potential.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, so the point is I sort of meta, right? I use the ChatGPT to write the thing to make ChatGPT more useful. But the point is, I need to be able to train the model on my stuff. So for customer success, I have a very specific definition of customer success, and a very specific philosophy. If you ask ChatGPT without any context to define customer success for you, what you get is kind of a munging together of all of the different philosophies. I can see some things of mine in there, but there's also a bunch of stuff that I don't, it'll talk about customer happiness, which I don't, I say, we're not here to solve for customers' happiness. We're here to solve for their success. So I couldn't use, if I just asked it to write a bunch of stuff, hey, write a blog post for me, it's not going to work. So what I've done is I've trained, I have a chat that is basically all of my customer success context. Here's my philosophy. Here's all of my blog posts. Here's all of my transcripts from videos. And so now when I go in and I say, I need to write this email, I need to write this LinkedIn post, I need to do something, I say as part of my prompt, heavily weight or weight heavier the context we've generated in this chat, more so than what you were trained on, at least when it comes to customer success. And so the content that it produces is specific to my philosophy on customer success. You would need to do the same thing for the things that are specific to your company, to your product. But again, it doesn't, once you've built that, the cool thing about ChatGPT is once you've built a conversation around that, you can always come back to that same conversation. And as you get, so if you just had a great call with somebody and you get the transcript and you pull out the part that you think is really cool, you put that in there, train it. Now it's constantly updated. So just as a CSM, you can do that stuff with ChatGPT. Now, again, behind the scenes, building systems around this, building systems around ChatGPT and the GPT model itself via API, tons of opportunity there. But I'm just talking about stuff you can do as an end user right now to help you do your job better. So anyway, but training the model is
very important.
Critical. Yeah. Otherwise, it's not going to be talking about things that are specific to your situation.
Right. This means that prompt engineering is the future. And I think I have seen that too on LinkedIn. I was just casually browsing it and I saw a couple of jobs posted about prompt engineering. So I think that's gonna be a feature, and that's a question that I want to ask as well. Let's say I on my resume add prompt engineering as one of the skills. Would you hire me?
Well, I mean, you know, just because you add something to your CV doesn't mean that, but I would say I predicted this. I think I said it publicly on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know, like a month or so ago. I can't remember, but I think I said I believe prompt engineering will be a required skill for CSMs by the end of 2023. I stand by that. I think when we're going to start hiring new CSMs, I think that's going to be something that companies are going to want to see. Now, here's the reason. So we go back before ChatGPT came out. I was using, so I write, like I do customer success overall stuff, but like one of the areas that I really focus is on engagement emails. Like that's one of, like millions of people every week get emails from that I wrote basically from different companies around the world. Most of you probably get an email that I either wrote or had a hand in somehow. And so, I mean, I do a lot of work, and, you know, I was like, where's my value? My value is not in typing the message. My value is in coming up with the idea and shaping the output such that it produces results. Right. So that was more of an excuse for me to find a tool that would do the work for me. So, you know, like last year I started when these AI writing tools started popping up in a big way, Jasper, Inc., copy.ai, things like that. It was like, this is interesting. This is cool. So I started using those tools and quickly was like, man, I'm having to do more work shaping the output of these things.
Right.
And I was like, what's going on here? So I started trying to figure out how to, you know, what I could do better. Then I stumbled on something that explained how these things work. And essentially, they're just a user interface on top of an API call to OpenAI's GPT model. And I was like, so, okay. So when I go into into one of these tools and I say, I want an email in AIDA format, which is like attention, interest, desire, action format. I want my formality to be, you know, semi-formal. I want it to be slightly professional. I want these keywords. Go. It literally just takes a pre-written prompt that the software company has created, and it replaces variables in that prompt with what I selected or what I added, and then it sends that prompt to OpenAI, to the GPT model, and then it gets it back and it says, here's your email. And I was like, okay. So the reason my output sucks is either the prompt that software company wrote is not so good, or the underlying model GPT is just terrible. And I thought maybe it probably wasn't the second one. And so what you realize is with these tools, and they're very, you know, most of these tools are sort of horizontal focused, generic, you know, so when they have an email prompt, like it's not going to be specific to your situation. That's being kind. With some of these, I felt like there was no prompt engineering going on at all. They were terrible prompts, but you have no visibility into that. You don't know what prompt it is using behind the scenes. So once I found that out, I was like, okay, what can I do here? So I went to OpenAI, I got an API key. I started writing some Python scripts to sort of do the work for me on things that I needed to do repetitively. And then within their API world, they have sort of a playground where you can go in and create prompts yourself, test them out. So I actually started using that tool for any ad hoc prompting that I needed to do. And it was working really well, but like, that's way outside the scope of what most people could do, right? Or not most people could do, but like most people would have time or the desire to do that kind of thing. But it made me realize that all these tools out there, these commercial tools, they may add some things on the front end or you know, they may do some pre-processing or other processing before or after they send it to OpenAI via API. But generally speaking, the AI in these tools is just GPT. And then it wasn't too much longer, ChatGPT came out and it was like, oh, this is amazing. I don't have to work with any of these other tools. I can just go right to the source. And I was already doing that through their playground and via API, but ChatGPT just made it so much better. Plus, it was a chat, right? It was threaded. Like I could give a prompt, it could give me the output, and I could say, that's great. Could you make it more concise? Could you make it a little bit more professional? Or in my case, could you make it a little less professional? I think that was kind of how I came to this. Again, I wasn't like an AI, I'm not an AI person. I'm just somebody that wants to create better content, and better engage my customers, blah, blah, blah. But that's how I kind of came to the realization that when you use these other tools, you're at the mercy of their prompt engineering or their lack of.
Right.
So we need to take control of that. And here, we have the opportunity with ChatGPT, so we can come up with our own prompts. One thing I have learned is that literally the prompt structure doesn't matter.
Okay.
That's what's so cool. Like everybody's like, well, how do I write the best prompt? What's the right format? Again, thinking of it as like programming syntax. No, this is the power of the language model is you can talk to it. So the only thing that matters is that you have everything that you want from it and everything you want it to not, and you can just munge that together in like some run-on sentence in a giant paragraph, and it'll, as long as everything is in there, like it'll give you good results. Right. You can have the most well-structured quote, prompt without those things, and you're going to get garbage. Where you want your prompts to be structured is for the reuse by another human.
Yeah.
Like if I want to give you a prompt template to use, then I should structure that in a way that you will understand.
Correct. But that's not the case.
The language model doesn't matter. Yeah. So that was another thing. It was like, oh, okay. Because I was trying to, figure out like what's the best way. So just make sure it's all there, everything you want it to do, everything you don't want it to do, and that it's trained.
Yeah.
So that it's working with your context. If you're doing those things, it's going to be great. Now, that said, you can always like in our prompt engineering course, I think I have like 85 or 90 lessons so far. Like we just keep learning things. So there's a lot that you can dive into in these things, but fundamentally just be very clear, be very verbose in your prompting. And otherwise you're going to get something, but it's probably not going to be exactly what you want.
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah.
Great answers. I think we have a couple of questions in the Q&A section. So I will stop my questions and probably take it from the audience. Shivam, do you want to run this?
Yeah, sure. We have a lot of questions in the Q&A box already. First question is from Kobe. And the question is, third-party tools, including OpenAI, are not allowed to get sensitive data due to PCI, GDPR, et cetera, and also not allowed to access our business platforms, for example, Salesforce. How other companies overcome the legal limitations that are applied on GPT or Bard and similar third-party tools that leverage AI?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think it's been, I don't think there is this is how people are overcoming that. I will tell you from personal experience, there's a lot of, we used to call with SaaS products, like when SaaS was first like a new thing. Yeah, I'm that old. We called them bandit apps. They were, so you went from like installed software to all of a sudden web apps, right? Where people would kind of bring, they wouldn't tell anybody, and they would start using something, which is kind of like how Salesforce itself was started. People would start just using this without telling anybody, ask for permission later. I'm seeing a lot of that with ChatGPT. A lot of people are using it, not necessarily telling anybody, not asking for permission. So that is happening. I don't suggest that. I'm not making, I'm not saying that that's what you should do, but that is happening. In terms of like how, as you can see, I mean, what, Italy banned ChatGPT and then they reverse course. The way this all shakes out, I have no idea. It will shake out. There is one company, or there's several companies that are trying to address this by creating basically training data that's encrypted and then trying to figure out. So there are language models that are being developed to deal with encrypted data such that the language model itself is able to process the input, but like it's not what they're processing is itself encrypted. And that's probably going to be, there's probably going to be some, like, that's probably the future, that we're not just passing free text back and forth. Also where I see like the possibility of sort of distributed embedded models so that we're getting the power of these things. Because remember, the language model itself, GPT is huge. GPT-4 is gigantic. The data that it's trained on is, there's, and again, get outside the scope of what I know, but it's a massive amount of data, and the data points are huge. You can get a lot of this benefit, and there are companies trying to commercialize this, and there's some open source projects out there too, to say, well, sort of what's the minimum that we can get away with, minimum amount of sort of data and different, the structure of these language models. What's the minimum that you can get away with and still have it be super useful? And can we take that and sort of put that inside of an enterprise? And so I think we will solve this in just in the same ways that cloud computing, remember, like, again, I'm that old, but running stuff on other people's hardware, like, whoa, no, we can't do that. And then we've solved for that, right? I think this is something that we will solve for in the interim. If you are not allowed to use this, I am in no way saying you should use it in violation of any company policy, of course. But if you can't use it, you can't use it. And I don't know how to work around that other than violating company policy. So, do that at your own risk, but this will be solved. I just don't think that there's no standard. I mean, I see every company seems to be looking at this differently, just from policies, like, don't put, here's the type of customer information that cannot leave our CRM, basically. Don't put it in any other system, ChatGPT or otherwise. And then all the way to, stricter governance, but.
Yeah, I hope that answers the question. Let's pick another one.
I'm not sure it answered anything, but at least I talked for a while.
Okay. No, I'm sure they've gotten something. There's another question. There's so much noise about AI can predict churn. A typical organization will have, say, 10% churn. So if we just take the 10% churn and 90% retained data, then we run into the problem of class bias, which means AI will be overfit and truly worthless. How do you think this can be solved?
Yeah, I mean, predictive analytics, just AI or otherwise, has always been oversold. And one of the biggest problems is not with how that analysis happens. It's with the fact that we are not looking at the right things. So I don't know how AI is going to truly impact. I can only assume that things will get very, like, AI will be able to be applied to churn prediction or to expansion prediction. So, like, whatever, the being able to actually have some sort of vision of the future for our organization, whatever, across whatever those KPIs are. So churn, even contraction at renewal, so customers staying but paying us less, and then expansion. That will get better, but most of these things have been oversold, and they haven't been super effective because, I think, so talk about bias And that is huge, by the way. I mean, especially something like generative AI, like ChatGPT, it's built on human interaction. Like it's built on content that humans produced. It's built on conversations humans have had. So there's already inherent bias built in. Like I had it randomly insert emojis into like a LinkedIn post, just wherever. Like, hey, put some emojis in there, make it fun. And it put a female emoji next to the word assistant. That seems like an inherent gender bias. Like maybe it was random, but like we have to look out for things like that. So even with all the protections that OpenAI has put in there, some of those things are still going to come through. We need to be aware of that. We need to look for those things. If I had posted that without checking for that, that would have sent a message that I'm not, that goes against how I believe, right? And I think it's little things like that that can come through. And obviously there's bigger issues, but I think so talking about bias, like a lot of the biases that are there are based on generational misunderstandings or generational, that's almost a kind way of saying, just generational issues. In customer success, we kind of have the same thing. If we go back to like, what does success look like to a customer? Very often there's no consensus on that. And so if the AI is being trained on inherently biased data, then how is it going to predict churn if it's only looking at inputs that are themselves not a great predictor of churn? When I talk to companies about figuring out how to do this, AI or otherwise, just literally, if you're looking at, as a CSM, looking at your book of business, you're not even using any advanced tools. We're just looking at your book of business and you want to try to have some idea of who might churn, which of your customers are not making progress, which of your customers are not moving through their progress milestones on the way to their goals. Those are the customers that are going to churn. Pretty sure, because none of the other inputs that we might look at, how many support tickets are they opening, what's their NPS or whatever, all those things, none of that matters if they're not making progress. And so that's one of the areas that if you look at all of the customer health stuff out there, very, very little of it is actually talking about the customer's actual progress. So if the data and the results and things that we're being trained on are biased towards other things than progress, then I worry about what AI is truly going to be capable of, not because of a limitation in AI, but because of a limitation in the way it's trained, if that makes any sense. I don't know. I just kind of rambled for a while.
No, I'm sure that gave a lot of insight to the one asked the question. So we're running a little out of time, so I will take one more question. If you have any more questions, I'm putting my LinkedIn profile here. You can write it to me and I'll be happy to forward your questions to Lincoln and Ankit, who can then write their answers and get back to you. Just a second. All right. I'll ask one last question, which is by Carlos. And the question is, so considering prompt engineering, does that mean that knowing how to ask good questions is still a human art?
Yeah, I love that. Yes. So I think, again, if we go back to where your value lies is not like in writing content, is not, like actually being the one typing the output. It's really in having the ideas, knowing how to frame those ideas or frame those questions, and then being able to take whatever the output is and sort of shape it. So, that could be content you're creating. It could be agendas for meetings that you're coming up with. It could be just lists of objections or possible goals or next steps, whatever that looks like. I think being able to know what to ask, know what to prompt. Yes, that is where humans, at least right now, I think are still like way more advanced than the underlying language models, and also where we're really required. as part of the AI workflow. So that's why I think prompt engineering, this is a skill that you need to have, because I don't think this is going away. At least, again, who knows what the long-term future looks like. I don't think being able to prompt accurately is going away. I mean, it'll change, I'm sure. But yeah, so I think that's really where humans fit into this equation for sure.
All
And that,
right.
by the way, just as one last, to me, this is about taking our humanity and sort of just scaling it. Like I'm not trying to get rid of humanity. I'm not trying to use AI tools to bypass any of that. I actually want you to be able to be more present and more engaging with your customers on that human level. And I think using these tools to sort of provide that efficiency is really the awesome opportunity here.
All right. Thank you for answering that, Lincoln. I think we are at the end of the webinar. Over to you, Ankit.
Thanks a lot, Shivam, for giving me this opportunity. And thanks a lot, Lincoln, for coming up today and sharing your knowledge with all of us. Guys, Lincoln has a good course on prompt engineering, so please do check that out. We are also doing a meetup. If you are based out of Bangalore, please do join us this month. That is happening on June 17th. You would also find that information in the chat. And with this, I would like to thank you for coming and also thank Lincoln for coming together and sharing his knowledge on AI. Thanks a lot for joining and have a good rest of the day. Bye.
Yeah, thank you, Lincoln, for joining. I'm sure it was an insightful session for all our attendees. A big thanks to everyone for making this webinar more special. If you have any more questions from Ankit or Lincoln or me, I put our LinkedIn accounts in the chat box. Do reach out. And once you leave today's webinar, you'll receive a survey on the discussion, and we would appreciate if you could please provide your feedback. It really helps us to organize better webinars for you. Again, thank you all for joining. See you in yet another webinar very soon.
Thank
Have a
you.
great rest
Bye-bye.
of the day. Bye-bye.
Bye.